That was such an amazing introduction with Raghavendra and so much of energy that got radiated. Right. So before I start my topic, let me ask you a question which is coming up on the screen. So you can answer in the chat. You can take help of chat to answer this. So I'll wait for a few seconds. So how many of you have ever felt sleepy, foggy, or low energy after having a good meal actually? So I can see some of you are answering yes, right? Great. Many of us, right? Even I have felt it at times actually, right? Great. So let me ask second question. Great. Keep it coming. No? Yeah. So what do you think? How I mean today's topic is about glucose spike and what you don't track might be hurting you, right? So many of us know that it's good to check HbA1c often and to get our sugar levels. But is that enough to conclude that we are healthy? So you can make use of chat to answer this question. As long as your HbA1c is normal, do you think your blood sugar is healthy? Okay. Keep it coming, keep the answers coming. All right. Many of you seems to know the answer actually already, right? Okay, great. So let's get deep into the topic, right? See, I mean, what we do. So once in a while, we get a regular health checkup, and maybe if you're a diabetic, you might have a glucose monitoring device where you check this sugar level once in once you wake up in the morning, or once you have your meals, like 2 hours after the meals, right? It gives you a reading, which is good to know that the current state of sugar actually, right? But is that enough to come to a conclusion, or how does that help you actually, right? So if you see the red crosses here, these are the readings when you get actually when you take a random sugar test, right? So suppose, let's say, you get up in the morning and you take a random sugar test using your glucose meter, and you get a reading of 80, and you conclude that yes, you are in the range, you are healthy, right? Or maybe you took a reading after a couple of hours after your meals, and you got, let's say, 100, which is within the range, and you conclude that you are healthy. But that's not the case actually. So what we are going to talk today is something called glucose variability, right? And so while the random sugar test will give you a reading at just at that moment of time, what is the sugar level in your body. On another case, HbA1c gives you a 3 months average reading actually based on glycated hemoglobins, like the percentage actually, right? So it's a 3 to 4 months of average because that's the lifespan of a red blood cells in our body, right? So on one hand, you have instant reading of the moment. On other hand, you have a reading of 3 months average. But there is something in between, right? So that is nothing but glucose variability. Whereas, so what is happening throughout the days? How is your sugar levels throughout the day? So that is what is nothing but glucose variability, right? So it's nothing but compared to your average, the baseline, the normal range, how much is your sugar level going up or down. So that is what is called as glucose variability, and why it is important actually to know this, right? It's important to know because it gives you a fluctuation in blood glucose levels throughout the day, right? And normally you use a CGM device to measure it actually, and that gives you something called time in range, like how much time your glucose was within the allowed range, and what is the standard deviation, right? Don't worry much if you don't understand, right? Yeah. So I'll give you an example. Let's say the person A, where you can see the green line, and where you can see the person B, where you can see a dotted orange line. So these are two different sugar levels of two different people who have the same HbA1c. Okay. So let's assume maybe they have a HbA1c of 5, a normal range, right? But if you take their glucose variability throughout the day, it gives us different picture at all actually, right? So somebody might have a smaller variation, like compared to, like, let's say, a normal range of 100, on average, a normal level of 100. Can you see that green line is has a smaller spikes and smaller valleys actually, right? While the other hand, if you see the orange line, there is too much of variation. It has gone up till 140 and come down till 60. A lot of variations, right? A lot of spikes and valleys, right? What happens is two people might have a same HbA1c, but they have a different entire things going in their body, and they have a different experience altogether actually, even if they ate the same food, right? Or a similar food. Okay, because HbA1c tells you the average, but glucose variability tells you what the person is experiencing actually, your experience. Okay. So why it matters? Because GV tells you, are you having an inflammation, oxidative stress, or insulin resistance, right? It can have a risk factors of, you becoming a diabetic, or if you're already diabetic, then you are more prone to have a, other side effects of the diabetes actually, right? And just to remind you, this is not just for people who are diabetic. This is for people who are, this is important for people who are not diabetic also to know actually, right? So some of the symptoms, when you have this up and downs, actually, when you have this spikes and valleys in the sugar, these are some of the symptoms that, people will experience, maybe a post meal crash, despite having a good meal, you feel crashed, you feel fatigued, you have cravings. Like some people have cravings where, until or unless they have something sweet or something, they don't feel full actually, right? You might have an irritated mood actually. You might have a brain fog, or you might have an energy roller coaster, like, and this 1 hour you are highly energetic, and next 1 hour, you feel like, very low actually, right? So, why it is important to know the spikes and values actually. Why does it matter? And how does it matter actually? Because if my HbA1c is in a healthy range, why should I worry about the spike and values? Even because HbA1c is average and my average glucose level is normal, why should I worry about spikes actually? So the reason you need to worry is because what does the spikes tell you actually? So what happens is actually when there is a spike in glucose, your cells are flooded with more glucose than they need actually, right? Because of our mismatch in the food habits and our lifestyles that we have. If you have a more glucose rushing into your body, your cells are overloaded actually, right? And what happens is, in a response to overloaded cells, in order to clear out the excess sugar, your body releases large amount of insulin, right? Now that sounds good, right? So you have more glucose, but and then you also have a more insulin, so it should clear out, right? But what happens is when you have the excess sugar and insulin, it also trigger a pro-inflammatory response from the body actually, right? Wherein a lot of free radicals get generated in the body, right? And those will what damage your cells and other organs actually, right? So what happens in the valley actually? So sometimes, when your sugar spikes suddenly, your body produces a lot of insulin, and then that compensates actually. So sometimes, you have more insulin, so there is a overcompensation, and your glucose might become too low suddenly actually. That is why people will have a crashes, like, a 1 hour when they have something sugary, they feel very good, very elevated, high energy, and next 1 hour suddenly they feel crashed actually, right? Because you got overcompensated by the insulin, and then you suddenly feel, a low on energy, right? And what happens is when you fall short of glucose, I mean, when it comes to on a lower side, so basically it's a hypoglycemic event. So body detects that, okay, there is a danger happening in the body. Suddenly, sugar is too low, and the body signals to go into stress mode actually, right? And what happens? Body gets into stress mode, the other hormones that gets released, stress hormones like cortisol and adrenal, and again you might sudden feel rush of energy, but your body is in a stress mode actually. A lot of damages happening because of that, where a lot of free radicals are getting created, right? And again there is a spike in insulin, and again the cycles keeps happening, right? See what happens when you have a regular cycles of these elevated sugar and then low sugar actually, right? So it could lead to chronic inflammation where, somebody can have a joint pains, might have a brain fog, or you might have a low immunity, right? Because remember, because of the stress responses, your body might be in a constant inflammation state where your immunity will get down actually, right? And because of a lot of oxidative stress that is happening, your cells can get damaged. That is why, you might start feeling low on energy, and you might age faster actually, because now your cells are no longer performing in an optimal healthy state, right? Um, and if you are a non-diabetic, you might start developing insulin resistance actually, right? Which will lead to other issues actually. So obviously, one of that is diabetes. You might have PCOS. You might get, something else actually, right? You might have a liver damage. There could be many issues which insulin resistance can lead to actually, right? It can lead to hormonal disruption. So you might feel fatigued. You might have anxiety issues. You might have poor recovery from illness and all, so you might fall sick often, or you might start having sleep issues actually, right? So this is what happens when you have constant highs and lows actually. And mind you, this can happen even if you are non-diabetic, and even if your glucose meter says you have a healthy glucose range, and your HbA1c is in a normal range actually, right? um, so what causes the spikes actually, right? So let's understand. Yes, we understood that, uh, you know, um, see, respond me in the chat if you're able to follow what I'm saying actually, right? And you can say yes if you're able to follow me. Um, and then I'll proceed further. Yes, great, great. Thanks for being attentive. So what causes the spikes? So now we understood that, okay, there are spikes and lows happening, and because of which there is damage happening in the body. And how does this spikes get caused actually, right? So it get caused because of high glycemic meals. You might have a meal full of carbs, right? Maybe one full biryani from a Meghna Foods, and then maybe a Coke along with that, right? A perfect recipe for a high glucose spike, right? Or maybe a pizza, or maybe a burger, right? Or liquid carbs like fruit juices, especially if you have habit of having juices, or having sodas and all. So that can also give a huge spike, immediate spike actually, right? Sugar rush. Or eating a lot of things on an empty stomach, right? Or it might be because of your lack of sleep and stress. Yes, you might be eating healthy. You might be cautious about what goes into your plate. But what if you have a lot of stressful situation going on and you are not able to get a good enough sleep? That can also lead to a glucose spikes because of cortisol raising actually, right? And sedentary lifestyles, right? So many of us come from IT and we have a sedentary lifestyle. So that can also lead to a glucose spike actually, because you are not spending as much of energy as getting generated in your body, right? So who wants some tips, some practical tips to lower your glucose spikes and stay healthy throughout the day? So, put ready a message as ready in the chat if you're ready to get some practical tips actually. Great. I see many of you are ready. So let's get some practical tips, right? So first thing is eat fiber or protein first, then the carbs actually. So basically the food order matters. Okay. So I'll give an example after this. Okay. Let's just remember this, that you need to eat your fiber, protein first and carbs at the last, right? Avoid liquid sugars. So if you have habit of, having fruits in the form of juices, maybe try out, you should start having whole fruit instead of making it a juice out of it, right? And have vinegar in a glass of water before your meals. So go for 10 minutes walk after eating. So I'm sure many of you might have heard these advices from your coaches already, right? And still ignore this, right? Maybe I'll tell you, why this works out later point of time, right? But I'm sure many of you already know these advices, right? Nothing new for many of you, right? For some of you, it might be new and worth following, right? Yeah. Now let me explain you why the food order matters actually, right? How a simple change of just changing the order of food that you are eating, not changing the entire meal itself, can have a greater impact in your, glucose spikes, right? So can you see the three lines here, the green, orange, and the red, right? Green is where somebody. Okay. So many of you have responded. Let's say, let's say Monica, Monica is a person who eats her fiber salad first. She takes a plate and half of her plate is salad, and she eats the salad first. And then she eats her protein portion and then the fat and then the carbs. that gives her the lowest spike actually, and a best stability of glucose, because when you eat fiber first, it helps you to make the glucose release slow. Actually, it slows down the glucose release and the glucose metabolism actually, right? It gives an ample amount of time for your body to handle that rush. Okay, so just like a queue manager, just like, let's say you have an let's say you are entering a movie theater hall, there is a security standing there. He controls traffic, right? He makes you wait, and he checks your QR code, and then sends you inside. So that is how the crowd is managed, right? So just imagine your fiber and protein having them first acts as a crowd manager, and takes care of lowering the carb loads on your body, glucose load on your body, right? Let's say, another example, I'll not take the name. So let's say another person who eats his fat first, and then protein, and then carbs, and then the fiber last, right? It is still better. You will still have a moderate amount of spike because of some buffering effect because of the protein and fat you are having in the beginning. Still, it is greater than whatever the first person had, right? And the third one is where you are having the carbs first, then the protein, then the fat, then the fiber, because you already have a lot of carbs inside your system already, and then later comes the protein, fat, and fiber. So already cells are coping up with your carbs. So this is where you will have a sharp spike of your food, right? And it gives a high variability. So basically, when I say glucose variability, what they are trying to measure is what percentage, or like how much time in a day your glucose has gone up and down than the average standard reading actually, right? So that is what, how much is the variance, standard variance. That is what is measured actually. And some of the devices will help you to measure how much time you are in the range, like how much you are within the range and how much you are outside. So that gives a spike. Now, if you are not having protein, fat, fiber, and if you are just having a carbs, remember the Meghna biryani, right? That will have much bigger spike than this red line actually, right? It's maybe a blood red line you can imagine, which is outside this range, right? So that is how the spikes of sugar will happen actually. That is why the order of food matters. That is why we recommend you to have salad first, and then the rest of the things, right? So some of you might be wondering, you might be on the program and you might be wondering that you are still having salad every day. Maybe you are doing it in a wrong sequence actually. That is why you might not be able to see results actually, right? And so some practical tips, yeah, why it works. See, eating veggies or proteins first because it slows down your carbs absorption, like I said. You can take a screenshot of this if you want actually. And why adding vinegar will help. That will also help you to reduce the glucose spike actually, because it also slow down and takes care of things. So liquid sugars actually spikes fast. That is why I said you to avoid. And walking 10 minutes post meal. So it's a good advice which you can follow, because what happens is when you walk right after the meals, so some of the glucose lying in the bloodstream will get consumed by your muscles actually, right? That is how you can lower the load of those glucose, right? And never eat carbs alone, right? Mix it with, have it along with either a fiber or a protein portion actually. Sleep well. This is a great advice because we all have we are all, many of us are working profession. We have our own even the housewives, they have their own challenges. And you might be going through sleep issues actually, right? You might have a toddler at home. There could be many things. You might having poor sleep. That can also lead to an insulin resistance actually, right? And stay hydrated, important actually. So dehydration can also increase your glucose. So these are some of the practical tips, right? And so these are tips actually which you can pretty much do with your food and things. So some of the lifestyle changes that you need to do actually, because if you do follow this for only one day or a 2 day, it doesn't help you actually. What you need a lifestyle change, so you can make these things part of your lifestyle actually, right? First thing is walking after the meals. Right after the meals, just walk for 10 minutes, right? Manage your stress, right? Obviously we all have a lot of things going on in our life, but take time out to relax and chill and take a deep breathing actually. Maybe you can follow yoga routines, right? Sleep 7 to 8 hours. It's good because that will compensate for your stress hormones actually, and it will lower your stress hormones actually. right? And stay hydrated, have enough water throughout the day. Doesn't matter if it's winter or summer, obviously, but be mindful and make sure you will have at least a minimum amount of water throughout the day, right? Because if it's winter, sorry, if it's raining and other things, then we might not feel like drinking water. But still, I would advise you to have a track your hydration basically, right? And consistent meal timings, right? Because see, your body has a cycle and it follows circadian rhythm, and it follows a hormonal patterns, right? Because right after you wake up, within an hour, your glucose will spike again actually because of the cortisol that got released, which is telling you to that it's a day and your body has to start waking up and working out, right? That is why it's important to follow a consistent meal timing so that your body is tuned for your food habits actually, right? So that right hormone gets released at right time and you make best use of them, right? So I want to share some of the testimonies actually, where people have followed programs which has a similar guidelines actually, and they're able to get result, right? So right here we have Yogendra, who is entrepreneurs, right, who was able to improve his HbA1c dropping from 10 to 6.2. And again, I'm not telling that it's measuring HbA1c is bad or you should not measure at all. I'm telling is HbA1c is a good to get a 3 months snapshot. So if it's higher actually, it still means that maybe out of 3 months, 1 month in last previous 1 month you are able to control it, and maybe in the previous 2 months before to that you are not in control actually, right? If HbA1c is more, it still tells you that your lifestyle is still wrong actually, right? So it's still good to measure and good to have, right? But be mindful that just because HbA1c is normal, it doesn't give a permission to go out and eat whatever you want to actually, right? That is where you get the issues back, right? So where Yogendra, you can see Yogendra lost 8 kgs and he was also able to bring down his HbA1c from 10 to 6.2, which is a great thing, right? And he was able to lower. And so you can see Prem Kumar, who is a software engineer, and he's thrilled to share that he was able to bring down his HbA1c from 7.2 to 5.7 in 2 months, right? Which means that he was able to. So again, the reading itself says that he was able to have a better average control. He was able to bring down the average itself actually, right? And he was also able to lose 5 kg along, right? And we see it's not like I was saying, whatever I share today is applicable not just for diabetics, it's also for non-diabetics. So, like I said, you can see Rachana here, who was able to fix her thyroid and PCOS issues, which is again a side effects of insulin resistance. It's again because of the spikes and values of sugar, right? And she's able to fix her hormonal health, got her cravings reduced. Yeah, so obviously your cravings will be more when you have the spikes actually. That is why some of you are who are already on the program experience that within a week or two you get rid of your cravings because you have lesser spikes actually, right? And we have Srinivas, who was struggling severely with his gut health many years, and he was able to completely overcome, right? So these are few of testimonies. You can check out our Facebook page or get in touch with your coach, and you can go through a lot of other testimonies from the communities actually, right? Great. So I hope you have taken a screenshot of practical tips and you'll be able to follow from today itself, not tomorrow actually, right? So back to the host.